Today I want to talk about Texas, Pete Golding, and what actually has to happen with recruiting. And all that's coming up after the bumper.
Don't be cornering me. Hold up. Time. You gotta help me with that corner shit.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, I want to talk about Texas. And I get that we're talking about defense right now because Steve Sarkisian is still trying to hire a defensive coordinator, even as he has signed Jeff Banks to what we think is going to be a 3-year deal worth about $1 million a year to be special teams coordinator, but also just recruit, as Jeff Banks has been one of the best recruiters in college football the last couple of years, and that's an outstanding get for him, snatching one off of Nick Saban's staff. And he might be able to do it again. According to Horns 247, Pete Golding is very much in the mix, along with Chris Ash. And we'll see where it goes from there, right? There could be some moving and shaking over at Alabama, as Nick Saban might be looking to a Dan Lanning. That would mean perhaps a Will Muschamp at Georgia, but I really like Glenn Schumann. I would be interested to see when he got a coordinator job. But whether it's Golding or it's Ash or it's a dude we don't even know or have never heard about, the thing that's going to have to change is the recruiting, all right? Like, you can't get good if you don't have players that you're developing into NFL draft picks that are taken on day one. And the way that I think this starts for a place like Texas, with Steve Sarkisian coming in year one, is to lock down your state. Like, take a look at this. State of Ohio. The number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4 players in the in Ohio are all committed to Ohio State. Jack Sawyer, Mike Hall, Jaden Ballard, and Reed Carrico. Louisiana, LSU just won a national championship like a year ago. Mason Smith, Sage Ryan, Chris Hilton, and then Savion Jones at number 6. You skip a spot. Those guys are all committed to LSU. You look at Texas, among the top 10, you're talking about Jatavion Sanders. That's it. You got 3 in the top 10 committed to Alabama, and you got 3 in the top 11 committed to Oklahoma, and you got a handful that are committed to A&M. You have to take over Texas. You have to get back to recruiting in the way that Mack Brown was recruiting. And quite honestly, the way that Tom Herman was recruiting even as recently as 2019. And then you have to develop those kids into players, which means that you have to take the kids that are on campus right now and you have to develop them into players. You are given a gift in Bijan Robinson. Joel Klatt thinks he could be a Heisman finalist and has great odds to win it. That's going to depend on how Steve Sarkisian can use him and what the rest of the offense looks around him, because I'm really interested to see what Steve can do with those players, knowing what he was able to scheme up for guys like Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, Jaleel Billingsley, John Mechie, and even Jalen Waddle when he had him. Because you have Jake Smith, who was not just Gatorade Player of the Year in Arizona, he was the National Gatorade Player of the Year in 2019, the same year that Spencer Rattler came out of there. And that place to produce so much talent in Arizona. Like, if Arizona was just roped off for Arizona or Arizona State, you'd be talking about Chuba Purdy, Brock Purdy, Jack Miller, Bijan Robinson, Spencer Rattler, Noah Nelson, Mark Andrews, just in the last 5-6 years coming out of that place. That's what you need to do. That's what needs to happen. When you have Jordan Whittington and Jake Smith opposite each other with Bijan Robinson in the backfield, you ought to be able to score. And you ought to be able to score a bunch. Defensively, it's a little bit of a different story for them. I really like the way that Juwan Mitchell was coming on last year. And for me, he was the best linebacker that I'd seen over there since Malik Jefferson. But that, I think, was a flaw for Tom Herman, in that Malik Jefferson, I thought, was going to be a can't-miss first-round NFL draft pick when he went to Texas. He did not come out that way. And that one, I believe, goes on Charlie Strong's resume as much as it goes on Tom Herman's resume. Charlie Strong is going to be defensive coordinator at Jacksonville. That's going to be very cool. I can't wait to see what Charlie does with that defense. He's an outstanding defensive play caller, and I think if they get the offense figured out, they're going to be good over there. But that was what I wanted to get across here, is if it's Pete Golding, if it is Chris Ash, who knows, right? Quite honestly, at this point, we got some inklings and whatnot. They're going to have to recruit. And the thing that we know that Pete Golding can do is develop. Like, Pete Golding is the guy who was at UTSA that grew Marcus Davenport into a first-round NFL draft pick. Again, at University of Texas, San Antonio for the Roadrunners with a football program that is 2 minutes old. Okay? There's no tradition down there. And yet he was able to do that. He won at Delta State. He won at Tusculum. He won at UTSA, and he's won a national championship at Alabama. We also know that Texas does not want for funds, right? Like, P. Golden comes with like a $1.8 million buyout. And it feels like Texas boosters said, okay, where do I send the check? And that's got to be a really nice place for you to be as a head coach. But that also comes with a tremendous amount of pressure because you're given all the assets. And Stark said it himself. You don't turn down Texas. He doesn't turn down Texas. Perhaps Nick Saban turns down Texas, but that's another story that we got to talk about at a later date. But you're also going to have to take Jatavion Sanders. You're going to have to make him look good because that dude looks like a defensive end playing wide receiver. Okay? And Texas has been that place where athletes come to play wide receiver. Brew McCoy, when he was going to Texas, was going to play wide receiver, right? We look at Jake Smith and we see an athlete. We look at Jordan Whittington and we see an athlete, right? A guy that defies description. And yet you want to get him out there with the ball in his hands. Losing Billy Bowman to Oklahoma, that's an athlete that Texas would normally get, right? And we'll see what Billy ends up doing. I think he's going to end up playing kind of like a Christian McCaffrey slot back position where he gets to line up in the slot, line up in the backfield, line up on the numbers. Alex Grinch would love for him to play some defense for him, play a little safety, play a little nickel slot. I don't know that that's the way it's going to go. But you're always going to judge Texas by what Oklahoma does. And what Oklahoma has done is put guys in the first round of the NFL draft. They've won Big 12 championships, right? We know what it is at Oklahoma. And that is what Texas is having to chase right now. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I think they kind of got a bit of a group of five gauntlet to start. We'll see what actually happens with Rice because their upset of Marshall was tremendous to me. But if it's Casey Thompson, they're going to be fine. They're going to win 8-9 games. It's about, can you beat Oklahoma? Because if you can beat Oklahoma in your first year, that's a solid damn start. Because I believe that was the game that lost Tom Herman his job. You don't lose a quadruple overtime game against Oklahoma this year, you're probably still looking at Tom Herman as the head coach at Texas. All things to bear in mind. All right, that's it for me. Deuce.